Thank you. Well, I'd like to welcome everyone to the CPS Coordinators Forum. My name is Mandy Seetaller. I'm here on behalf of the National Child Passenger Safety Board, and we're glad to have you. A couple of quick reminders, if I can get there we go. Please do not participate in this call if you're operating a motor vehicle. We encourage you to pull over or disconnect, and you can listen to the recording later. And here is where the recording will be at cpsboard.org. Today's topic, issues in child passenger safety technician recruitment and retention, a Tennessee case study with practical national application presented by Dr. Angela Brown, child passenger safety technician and instructor. Dr. Angela Brown has 16 years of child passenger safety experience in coordination of intervention programs, establishment of community-based resources, curriculum development, and management trainings. She has worked with federal, state, and local agencies and community-based organizations in both the public and private sector to establish child passenger safety resources. She has her master's in business administration with an emphasis in management and a doctorate of education from Trevecca Nazarene University, Nashville, Tennessee. She began her career in child passenger safety as a CPS state coordinator for Mississippi and managed the state's Safe Kids Coalition. For 11 years, she managed the Tennessee Child Passenger Safety Center at Meharry Medical College, I apologize, the statewide CPS program for the Tennessee Highway Safety Office. Angela was also a member of the National Child Passenger Safety Board and served as chair of the Diversity Committee. She has also served as a committee member of the National Lifesavers Occupant Protection Planning Committee. Currently, she works for the National Safety Council as a senior program manager, where she oversees workplace safety training. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Brown.
Thank you, Mandy, for that introduction. I am so happy to be a part of this forum. This is my first time presenting in the CPS Coordinators Forum, so I hope this information is of benefit to you. Like Mandy stated, I do work for the National Safety Council as the Senior Program Manager for Workplace Training. However, this presentation is not at all associated with the National Safety Council. This is my research done in seeking my doctoral degree in educational leadership and professional practice. So right now I'm going to share my screen and we can definitely get started. Second, sorry. Hopefully everyone can see my screen. Give me a minute.
Perfect. Yep, you're good.
Okay, good deal. All right, remember, I can't see your beautiful faces, but you probably can see mine. I just wanted to give you an order of the presentation, just to give you a flow. One, to keep me on track, and two, to make sure that I cover everything that's needed. I want to give you the meat and potatoes of the research. I will at the end give you information on where you can find the information, but time is of the essence, and I want to make sure that I stay on track. So we're going to start off with the why, and I don't feel like I have to dwell on this too long because I feel like I'm preaching to the choir. We know the importance of child passenger safety technicians, the services they provide, and how it's important for them to stay active in the field. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about the who exactly was involved in the research, when it was conducted, a how, of course, and then we're going to get into spend a lot of time on the results. And then I'm going to sum it up with the contribution of the study and the implementations. So the purpose of the study was to explore the recruitment, the retention, and activity among CPSTs. And at the time of the study, just to give you a little bit of context, there were various reasons why I thought it was necessary to do this research. One, at that time, I was the program manager for the Tennessee Child Passenger Safety Center located at Meharry Medical College. And I received a grant from the Tennessee Highway Safety Office by way of the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. The funding used was to support certification trainings, renewal trainings, and CEU trainings. So on average, within a year, we conducted anywhere from 25 to 30 trainings, certifying anywhere from 120 to 150 technicians on an annual basis. However, many of those technicians were not renewing their certification. And I wanted to know why. As a program manager, I wanted to know why. We were offering the trainings, definitely bodies were in the seat. And so I wanted to kind of dig deep to find out what those gaps and those barriers were. And I wanted to pay close attention to those that volunteered to take the training versus those that were required to take the training. And I know some of you saying, like, you know, are there a number of people that are required to take the training? Yes. In collecting this research, we found out that a lot of people were what we call voluntold to take the training. And so I wanted to dig deep to see how active they were they understanding the recertification requirements, and to address those barriers. And I also wanted to see how retention affected the CPS community resources. And that could have been anything from a checkup event to a permanent fitting station to offering a workshop. And I just want to kind of cover to make sure that we were doing everything as a program to address some of those gaps and barriers. And then the second reason why I felt like it was necessary to conduct this study, one, we've seen various research on the services offered by technicians, but there's very little research, to my knowledge, on the actual profession itself. And from the various researches that has been conducted on the services provided, and it shows how significant of education that is provided by a CPST, it's important to know why this group is not keeping up with their certification, because they play such a vital role in that transfer of information. So I wanted to bring this to your attention. You know, recently we had a great win in the recent bill that was passed. And we were included. Child passenger safety as a whole has made tremendous strides in the field. Child passenger safety technicians, the profession has evolved over the years. People know exactly what we do now, and we play a significant role. But what one of the reasons that you know, I wanted to get on this research was because Tennessee consistently fell below the national recertification rate. Reported by Safe Kids, the national rate at the time was 56%, and Tennessee fell a little bit below at 45%. And so I wanted to see what was the reason behind that. And one of the main things that stuck out to me is that 75% of the people we were certifying were law enforcement and emergency personnel. And then Safe Kids also reported about 50% of the people that were certifying were law enforcement and personnel. So that's pretty interesting, because this is the group that parents associate with the most. This is the group that parents seek out that education. So it's important to figure out, you know, why this particular group that represent the masses of the people that are being certified are not renewing their certification. And so a couple of reasons, you know, change in jobs, change in promotion, all play a significant part. And we'll dig deep later in the research to show that. But I wanted to point out here, in the actual bill, it states to recruit and train nationally certified child passenger safety technicians among police officers, fire, and other first responders, emergency medical personnel, and other individuals or organizations serving low income and underserved populations. I think it's great that they included that in the bill, but what I also want to urge safety state safety leaders to take a look at is that police officers, fire, and first responders are highlighted. And although that's great, I feel like sometimes we put at the back burner the other individuals or organizations. And so we have to collectively make sure that when we're recruiting, that our efforts are kind of even out across the board. This is a very important group due to the association. However, when it comes to retention, it is difficult for this group to maintain their certification because of the structure of promotion, change in roles, change in supervisors. So I want to urge highway safety professionals when developing their highway safety plans to balance the recruitment efforts to make sure that the others are being included as well. So a little bit of literature that goes behind, and as I stated before, I don't think I have to dwell too much on this. CPSTs, they provide education, they set the stage for learning through observational learning, they transfer their information where parents actually, become a part of that learn, practice, explain philosophy. They learn from the technician, they practice those skills, they explain those skills to everyone that is involved with the transportation of the child. So this is just a little bit of literature to support why it was, again, needed to do some research to keep the professionals certified and to find out how they're being recruited. Again, low CPS retention in the state of Tennessee. In 2016, we reported a 45% recertification rate. The national was 56 at the time. Again, Safe Kids reported 50% were being certified, law enforcement, emergency personnel, 75%. And the structure of the Tennessee Child Passenger Safety Program at the time was very law enforcement driven. Funding came from the Highway Safety Office. So a lot of bodies in the classes were from law enforcement and emergency personnel. And there was a lot of time and funding devoted to those certification and renewal classes, as well as the CEU classes. So on average, an estimate of $60,000 was expended in contractual fees and certification fees. And I know everybody's program is set up differently, but in the state of Tennessee, the registration fee was paid for anyone that was interested in attending the class. Research fees were not paid for, but that $85 at the time, I believe it was $85 was paid. And then there were contractual fees for instructors that were paid. So with all that time and money being devoted to certification classes and registration fees, again, it was a need to look into why those individuals were not recertifying. On a national average, Safe Kids reported that 32% said they did not recertify due to change in roles. And this is consistent with the group law enforcement emergency personnel because of just the flow and promotion and the change in supervisors. So the sample size consisted of individuals that enrolled in the certification course and the renewal course. My expectations were really, really high going in. With the amount of classes that we were conducting, I was expecting to get 100 people signed up to be a part of the study. And then as I went on, my expectations lowered to 50. And then I was barely able to get 30 participants to participate in the research study. And a lot of it was because people just were not comfortable, even though the study was confidential, they were just not comfortable talking about their employer. So we were able to get 30 people, 16 that volunteered, 14 that were required from 10 different cities. And these individuals were expected to be a part of surveys, interview questions, and also to report on the activity. There were some limitations to this study, and I just want to just put that out there up front. It was convenient to use the students in the classes that were already on schedule. And the results do not represent the masses. As you can see, this was a study conducted in Middle Tennessee, so it doesn't represent the entire population of CPSTs, but it does provide some support to what Safe Kids have been reporting in their reports. There were some time constraints because I was very careful not to interfere with the training itself. So surveys and interviews were conducted before the training, after the training, during breaks. And it was very time consuming because I wanted to gather as much information as possible. It was 7 months devoted to collecting activity. And I thought it was important to collect the activity because, as you will see in the surveys and the interview questions that were conducted, the expectations of the technician may have been different from what they were actually doing in the field. And so it was 7 months of activity that was reported through an online system developed by Tennessee Tech University. So there were 3 research questions that guided the study. The goal was to pinpoint the gaps, the barriers in retention, and to also get an idea of the perceptions and expectations of the CPST, to see their level of commitment, their employer level of commitment, because their level of commitment provided insight on whether they understood the recertification process and were they on the right path to completing the recertification requirements. So the first question was, what is the relationship between the educational resources provided by CPSTs to parents regarding car seat usage? And so in this question, educational resources could have been anything from a checkup event, a CPS booth, a permanent fitting station. I wanted to see how active were these technicians? How much did they contribute to addressing misuse and usage in the state of Tennessee? And that spoke a lot, their level of commitment, the type of activity that they conducted, spoke a lot to whether they were going to remain certified. Let me give you an example. If a technician was required by their employer to conduct a checkup event on a quarterly basis or a monthly basis, that required more time in gathering materials, meeting with external partners, recruiting volunteers. If they were required to have a permanent fitting station at their work site, that required a level of commitment from their employer. So I wanted to look at all of that to see, how realistic and practical was this for the technician, and were they going to keep this up? Because a part of that activity was meeting their recertification requirement. And so I wanted to make that comparison and look at that relationship. And then the second question, what are the attitudes, behaviors, and perceptions of child passenger safety technicians on the recertification process, their employer commitment and certification and the certification training in Tennessee? A lot of the individuals that were required to take the course, they had no idea what they were walking into. They had no idea what the recertification requirements were. And really, their employer really had no expectations or game plan or anything rolled out to keep the CPS program going in their agency. So I wanted to get that feedback because all of that goes back to the motivation for the technician to stay certified. And I use thematic content analysis where the feedback that was collected was put into 3 different groups. According to the responses, and I kind of grouped that together to come up with a consensus on what the volunteer group gave feedback that they gave back, as well as the required group. And then lastly, how active are CPS technicians in their communities who have volunteered versus those that are required? I wanted to see the difference between the two, just to see where the motivation was, I use Pearson R to measure that relationship. So again, there were 30 students that received surveys. What was collected was the knowledge of the research process, level of commitment, anticipated activities, they were giving a packet with the checklist forms and instructions on how to report online. Again, it was very convenient for me because Tennessee Tech had developed this online reporting process for our CPS program. And so they were able to report any events that they did, the checkup events, a workshop, a booth that they set up, all of those were reported online, sent automatically to me. And I was just able to kind of keep track of that. Students were interviewed and there were, interview questions that really, I kind of gathered. Like I stated before, there was no really research done on this profession. So I had to look at other research in different professions and kind of gather what they use and to come up with some type of interview questions. And I wanted to get their perceptions on the certification, their employer commitment. And again, the surveys were done on site. The CPS reporting was done over 7 months. And then again, those interview questions were self-developed just based off of other research that was done in the nursing field and its teaching field, engineer. And I just looked at what questions that I need to ask the technician. And I can share that with you guys if you want that later on. So in looking at the results for question 1, looking at the educational resources that were provided and how active they were. So the results looked at as CPST's car checks increased, then scheduled car seat appointments at their work increase. And this was pretty important because that meant that the employer had to have a high level of commitment to allow the CPST to schedule the car seat appointments at the location. And also too, in looking at reports provided by the Highway Safety Office, they reported an increase in office checks. So again, that level of commitment coming from the employer really played a part in, if this technician, if they were allowed to do this, if the technician was going to continue to remain certified. So this question just showed that, it isn't, in the state of Tennessee, if it was, the activities showed that it was important for the employer to have a high level of commitment to continue to provide this type of resource. In question 2, what are the attitudes, behaviors, and perceptions of CPSTs of the recertification process, recruitment, and certification training? Believe it or not, most CPSTs reported that they only logged in to their CPS profile maybe once or twice. They had really little knowledge of how to navigate, and I thought that this was really important because a part of the recertification process, you have to enter in your seat checks, you have to enter in your CEUs, you have to know how to navigate that SafeKit site. And you are able to find a lot of CEU content by logging into your CPS profile, and they were not doing this. Most stated that they didn't receive any direction from their employer, so they were just given instructions to attend the training, not really anything laid out, such as a budget or a plan or any feedback on expectations of events that needed to be conducted. A majority of the participants, again, worked in law enforcement field, doubted whether they were going to be in this for the long haul because of the change in manpower and the supervisor or being promoted. Child passenger safety is highly important to those that are in the field. But sometimes when you look at the overall picture of distracted driving, DUI, it really comes low at the totem pole. So as the department changes and as the supervisors change, the direction changed. And many of the CPSTs that I interviewed spoke to that. So some just the key takeaways, just lack of use of that certification site. And, in looking at that, I kind of, changed midways when I conducted as I was gathering that information, I changed midways when I conducted the certification trainings. At the end of the day or the beginning of the day, I went through the certification of the Safe Kids certification site to make sure that those technicians were aware of the resources that were there for recertification and to make sure that they knew how to navigate their CPS profile. Again, that lack of support from the employer was significant, being that the employer really held the strings, so to speak, in guiding whether this technician was going to remain active in the field. So in question 3, how active were CPSTs in their community who volunteered versus those that were required to take the course? As CPSTs, car seats increased at the work, it usually occurred around a quarterly basis. And this was in line with the Tennessee Highway Safety Office was reporting as well, because a lot of these agencies that attended the class, they either had a grant with the Highway Safety Office or they had to report on something. So normally they did it, around that quarterly time when it was time to report, which just showed how much of a need of the employer support was needed. Both groups show more activity at work versus community activities. And I just assume that because community activities take a little bit more of commitment and a little bit more time. However, those office checks, again, permanent fitting station requires more commitment from the employer to allow, because this is when parents are scheduling appointments in order to get their car seats checked. And maybe I need to really address, like, I see the word fitting station and checkup event used interchangeably. In Tennessee, a fitting station was a permanent place that parents can go and schedule to get their car seat checked, whereas a checkup event was probably held not permanent, held in various places throughout the community, many times with an external partner. And so when I talk about fitting station, that's what I'm referring to, that permanent place where parents are able to go to get their car seats checked. And that's where that employer commitment was important. And also important because if that technician was relying on that permanent fitting station to get that activity that they needed in order to recertify, then it was important for that employer to show a high level of commitment. The volunteer group conducted 21 events, and they reported, the volunteer group, they reported having a greater support from their employers. Some even said that they had a small budget. They had direction on when their supervisor or their employer expected events to be held, whether it was on a monthly basis or quarterly basis or centered around a campaign. And they showed good activity. And that was important because within that we have 2 years for our certification cycle. And so within that 7 months, they showed good activity, which was a clear indicator that they were on track to finishing their CPS recertifying. One of the requirements to get recertified, I'm sure you know this, is to participate in a community checkup event or some type of community event where they either are observed in getting their seats checked off, or providing some type of level of education to the community. The required group conducted 10 CPS events. Some do not report any activity. And because the activity was low, it was, an indication that they will either scramble at the end in meeting those requirements, or they were not going to recertify at all. Some people even reported that they were told at the last minute, or they were going to be a replacement for someone in attending those certification trainings. So they came in totally blindsided. I did receive some feedback saying that they were just told to come because it would be good PR for their organization. And then also too, this was big among law enforcement. Some were told that it was easier to go through the certification training to get post credits. Our trainings are usually done from either 3 to 5 days. And it is my understanding that law enforcement officers have to have 40 hours of post credits. And so because our trainings were pretty long, that we were offering in the state of Tennessee, they could get the most post credits. So that was the reasoning behind why some were required to attend. So just to talk about a little bit of the implications, profession seems to be a key indicator, and I get a feel that we know this, but we need to be aware of, we need to kind of figure out a way how we can even our efforts out when we're recruiting and we're maintaining, helping those groups maintain their certification. Again, law enforcement reported high as receiving their certification in the state of Tennessee, 75%. And I felt like we were just turning our wheels. Their profession is not going to change. And I'm not saying at all that this group should not be certified. What I am saying is simply that, we have to work strategically in helping this group stay consistent and on track with recertifying. And then we have to balance those efforts out in whom we recruit to. Every state is different. Very law enforcement, emergency personnel driven. So you may have a state where, the bulk is nurses or healthcare workers. But for the most part, we have to have an even level, so to speak, of recruitment and in ways of keeping the groups recertified. I think that if more guidance from the Highway Safety Office for employers, for instance, for the state of Tennessee, because it was so law enforcement driven, I would have liked to see more support in holding those agencies accountable, saying, hey, we're paying for the registration fee up front. We require, that your agency completes this many activities throughout the 2-year cycle. And if they do, we'll pay for their recertification, or we can share in the cost of the recertification. I mean, the registration fee. I mean, there has to be some level of accountability. And I think when it comes from the top, it holds a little bit more weight. And we just have to get serious in that, because as you can see, CPSTs this field is evolving. I mean, we're part of a bill now that's going to, affect the masses, and we're going to be looked to more so now in order to provide that education. So it definitely a tone has to be set at the top in order to support recertification efforts. So some recommendations. So conducting more local research. This was a small research study with very little, resources put behind it. Again, I didn't have a lot of other research to pull from that address this particular profession. There are various research on the services that CPSTs provide, services that support the importance of the profession, support how we change parents' usage in car seats, how we play a vital role in changing how manufacturers design their car seats and vehicle manufacturers. So if we play such a vital role in all of these things, then more efforts need to be put into making sure that the recertification requirements are met. The benefits could save time, it could save money and manpower. As I pointed out in my presentation, you know, we spent a lot of money in conducting these certification trainings, about $60,000 on an annual basis, just devoted to training alone. Just devoted to training alone. So that went into the registration fees as well as the contractual fees. And I feel like that's a considerable amount of money that is devoted to that area. And we were still falling below the recertification rate. And when I was looking at these areas, as you can see, different people, different groups were in different cities. I saw that in many of those areas, there were more expired technicians than there were certified. And I, you know, would just, you know, think how could it affect the misuse and unrestrained children if the, you know, if that wasn't the case, if the expired technicians were certified. And then again, going back to the employer intentions and commitments, making sure that that employer has that high level of commitment, has something laid out for the technician. Many report on having no type of direction from their employer. Many were told that, you know, the CPST trainings were just a temporary program or activity that they were going to conduct. So it's really important to have that high level of commitment from the employer. So the contributions of the study, I hope it supports the states and the programs to assist with CPS retention. I hope that people take some information back and kind of do a little assessment on their own CPS program and find any gaps or barriers that were there. I feel like all would benefit, especially those in the law enforcement and emergency personnel realm. And then I hope this also allows us to keep in mind about the other group. And that is, you know, the daycare workers, the nurses, the teachers, the bus drivers, anyone that is involved with families, like to keep them in mind as far as recruitment efforts, because their professions are a little bit more stable, and it probably will help balance out who we're certifying on a national level. Because again, reported by Safe Kids, 50% of people that were being certified at that time were law enforcement and emergency personnel. So I want to open it up for questions and discussions, and to get any feedback if possible.
Dr. Brown, wow, I am suddenly inspired and thinking that I need to rethink everything. So I would like to invite you to please put your questions in the chat box, but I already have a couple for you. How are the credits for law enforcement set up for your state? Do you have any more information on that?
How are the credits set up?
Yeah, how credits for law enforcement were set up for the state?
I think I understand your question. Well, the trainings that we conducted, we had to submit, and when I say we, I mean the trainings that I conducted had to be submitted to post to get approval, and those the trainings that were submitted were worth 40 hours of training. So I don't know if that answers your question, but the all of our trainings had to be submitted to post, the CEU trainings, the certification trainings, the renewal trainings. They're submitted to post. Post reviews them. They tell us how many credits it's worth, and then that individual, once they complete the training, they receive a certificate from the highway safety office saying that they were completed the training with those amount of post hours.
And can you define post for us?
Is police officer standardized training.
Thank
So
you.
I guess it would be equivalent to our CEUs.
Okay.
So yeah. And if a law enforcement officer is out there, please correct me.
What do you currently do to explain the commitment to potential students? Have you made changes based off your research?
Well, at the time, like I said, along the way, I made small changes when I saw that technicians were not logging into their profile, and even checking in on them, 4 months in, 3 months in, and finding out that they still had not logged into their profile. So I did little things like that. This research actually stepped on my toes a little bit because I worked at Meharry Medical College. And so I was like, well, how many people at my organization, this is a medical college, are certified? So I started, recruiting people within my organization that wasn't of that large group to get their certification, reaching out to other entities that had, like I said, a more stable job, whereas law enforcement, they go up the hierarchy. So those are some things that I did to kind of address the issue. And there was a second question to that. What was the?
Just if you had made any changes based off of your research, or how do you explain the commitment? Do you have a new spiel that you use for your students? Did you change what you say to them before they took the course?
Well, beforehand, I did talk a little bit about asking them to go back to their employer to see what the expectations were. Because like I said, a lot of people that were voluntold or were sent to the class for replacements, they had no direction at all. So it didn't hurt to ask. And so I told them, go back and ask if you even have a budget to conduct CPS events. And so it really kind of, to be honest with you, those that had been voluntold to attend the trainings, they kind of got a new level of motivation when they went back to their employer and had that conversation. They would come back and say, oh, I didn't know we had, money to purchase, money to do this. So for the most part, it was just having a conversation at the beginning with those technicians to ask them to go back to their employer to see what that expectation was.
Thank you. I do have another question, but I was going to ask you if you'd stop sharing your screen so we could see you.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, no, it's great. I just love hearing you speak. So did those that were struggling with logging in give any feedback on what they needed? Is that something we could teach in the curriculum?
I think for the most part, it was people were just not tech savvy. And so just really getting them familiar with logging in. And you have to keep in mind, the people that we were certifying, they really didn't, this wasn't something that they did with their other certifications. They didn't have to log in and they didn't have to track, their activities or CEUs. And so it really just took just some walking through. And once they were in and they realized, oh, I can even find CEUs in here and things like that. So I I made sure that every technician, like I said, I took time before class and after the certification trainings to walk them through, this is how you enter in seats, this is how you enter in a community event. And I know it was a little time consuming, but I felt like in the long run, it was very beneficial to them, because we just assume once we give them, once they get their check number and their username and password, and they receive that email from Safe Kids and, hey, you're registered, that they go and do what they need to do. But many of them were not doing that.
As a follow-up, do you believe that there was a generation gap in the technological access?
No, I don't think it was a generational gap. I think it was just being aware that this is something that you have to do for this particular certification. I just think it wasn't just a part of, like, I would hear them say, well, I have this certificate, I don't have to log in to do this or do that, or so-and-so tracks this for me. So I was just thinking, more of them knowing that, hey, this is your responsibility. This is what you need to do. So yeah, no, I don't think it was a generational gap.
Well, I personally find the whole thing very interesting. And I'm wondering, when we were chatting before you began, you said you had a lot more questions. What else would you like to know, or what would you like to find out, or anecdotally, what did you learn? It seems like there's so much that's so science-based, but what did you infer?
Well, I just want us to change the culture a little bit. And when I say change the culture, is, like I said, is this group, this mass group that is seeking our certification, a much needed group, because this is who parents associate with, law enforcement, emergency personnel. So we need this group, but we have to work a little bit harder. I would like for the minds to come together and think about a great way to make sure that this group stays on track and meeting the recertification requirements. And then also too, like I said, the culture, even what was written in the bill, it kind of, the culture kind of puts that other group to the side a little bit. And I feel like we just have to keep them in mind. We have to keep the CPS, the healthcare workers in mind. We have to keep the CPS, the drivers in mind when we're talking about recruiting, and when we're talking about just balancing that playing field out. So what I would like us to just think about ways, just think about the profession of those emergency workers and how we can better serve them in meeting those recertification requirements. The employer has definitely got to have that high level of commitment. We have to start holding the employer accountable. Again, like Tennessee, we pumped a lot of money. Maybe it's, you have to pay for this, a little bit of this, just to get our return on investment back, because for the most part, it appeared that they were just getting free trainings and not staying certified, because once their certification lapse, they could just hop in on another certification course or a renewal course. So it was, I don't want to say it wasn't a value. It's the culture that needed to be changed. And I hope I'm making sense here.
Oh, you are. We had a couple of comments from Anna. She said, this is great information and so timely. Texas is currently in the process of accepting an RFP for FY23 and listed CPST retention programs as a high priority need.
Mm-hmm.
And she also mentioned that it's important for instructors to build those relationships with students that go through our class, to be a resource for them. Let's see, Holly, there's a lot of comments pouring in now. Holly, in Arkansas, we spend about 30 minutes at the end of class going over how to log in and enter CEUs, community events and car seat checks. For techs in the field, we spend time on the phone going over step by step how to enter their recertification requirements, and sometimes that can take an hour or longer. So like you said, the time commitment. Dr. Bull is impressed with the value of the employer engagement and wonder if you have suggestions for instructors to be sure this is the place as they develop their classes. This is in place, I'm sorry, as they develop their
Say
classes.
that again. Could you say that question again?
Yes. Do you have suggestions for instructors to be sure this is in place as they developed their class? And that's the value of their employer engagement.
No, but well, here's it. I would like to see it somewhere plugged in. I can't remember which module it was in the certification training, but the how to, like logging into their profile, knowing what they need for recertification. This was something that I kind of plugged into after the module was over with. I would like to see it embedded in the curriculum, but I know like the curriculum has to cover so much. We only have a short amount of time to do it. So it's really going to take the effort of the instructor just devoting that time either before and after the training on recertification. But I would like to see it, be a part of like really embedded into the curriculum on how to meet recertification requirements. I don't know if that's a possibility, but put it out there.
Tammy Franks did point out that there is an action plan in module 13 to help set foundations. And if you haven't seen it yet, it is excellent. There's some space to fill in about who your coordinator is and who your contacts are. So I think that really helps. Juliet said, in Connecticut, we host 4 workshops a year where techs earn their 6 CEUs in one day. And that really helps them maintain their technicians. Jennifer says, I see new techs leaving a training feeling excited and energized to jump in and work out in the field, but they find themselves failing or falling back into their normal work routine. And it makes it difficult to add CPS to their already busy workload.
Yes.
Employer support seems vital to the success and sustainability of the CPS program. And wow, does that sum up what you've been talking about?
No, yeah, it actually does, because let me tell you this. And that's one of the reasons why I want to look at the activity that they were doing, because depending on the type of activity that they were required to do, it really, pointed to what their motivation was going to be like, where they're going to burn out. A lot of them started gung-ho in the beginning. We're going to conduct a checkup event every month. And they did start out like that. But again, it's so much effort into having a checkup event. It's a high level of committed in having a permanent fitting station. So it's just, them finding out what is practical for me as a technician, because it's the technician's certification, not the employer, what is practical for me with all the other responsibilities that I have to complete with my normal job. And then also too, making sure that employer has that level of commitment and they're supporting. Again, a lot of technicians that did activity said they had no support of their employer and they were doing stuff on their own. They were pulling money out of their pocket. So that conversation needs to be had with the technician and the employer. And then, like I said, if it came from the higher B's, so to speak, then I think it would definitely have a little bit more weight.
Tammy wanted to remind everyone that the National Child Passenger Safety Board is hosting a webinar for all child passenger safety technicians on January 18th at 1 p.m. on enhancing CPS efforts through working with law enforcement. Registration will be open this week, and there's a link in the chat for that. If not, please watch our Facebook page. We'll be showing that. And Anna once again commented that the value of the employer engagement is so important in retention. Mm-hmm. And that's giving me personal thought as I go through my courses to make sure that we engage the employer. We are talking to the technician and saying, here, you're certified, enjoy, but not telling the employer, helping them help our technicians. So there's a lot of takeaways to help all of us be successful, no matter where our technicians are coming from. Marissa?
And I do want to give kudos to Safe Kids, because if they weren't tracking that recertification rate and really taking the time out to survey, because they do have a survey that I don't know if it is still done now, but they do have a survey that they send out on, recertification. So I was able to dig through those reports and pull a lot of information out of that. And that gave me a clear picture of what it looked like on a national level, recertification rate, who were we certifying overall. So Safe Kids definitely contributed a lot to the information that I provided here, as well as Tennessee Tech. I cannot leave them out because Tennessee Tech provided their reporting process, and it made a lot of the collection of data a lot easier.
Well, we are all big fans of Tennessee Tech and the work that they do, especially with the National Digital Check Form. Marissa, hold on, I just lost her comment. She said that she agrees with the employer support. And in Texas, they are going to be rolling out a new application for distribution partner sites and have included a sustainability plan along with an employer commitment as part of the application.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah, isn't that wonderful? And
see, that's the type of stuff I'm talking about. That stuff that is going to stick,
And Tammy, we take the information we gather from these and the comments that we get. And Tammy Frank said, let's plan on the March Coordinator Forum being on employer support. Let's gather some more information and let's talk about it. This seems like a really great place to share that information. And if you have other ideas, please email secretariat@cpsboard.org for this forum. We want to make sure that we're talking about the topics that are important to each one of you. That's why we're here today. But this comment box is just blowing up. It's so fun. This has been so great. We are so lucky to have you here today. And I think that you're talking about what we're all worried about. We're doing all this work and how do we sustain our technicians? Beth said in Oklahoma, if someone wants to get a scholarship, then they have to have a form signed by their supervisor that they will get involved. And what another great way to make sure that the employer is aware of what's going to happen, what's supposed to come out of this.
That's wonderful.
So we've got just 2 more minutes or so. If you have any last minute questions, if you could put them in the box, we'd love to make sure that we get to all your questions. But Dr. Brown, I want to take just a moment and say how excited we are to have you today. Thank you for being with us, and we'll stick around for a few more minutes. I wanted to make sure that everybody knew when our next coordinator forum is, and that's going to be January 26th at 2 p.m. Eastern time. And then we have another one in February, and the topics are already planned for this. So please watch your calendar for the meeting invite. We want to make sure that you are able to attend. Tammy, I'm unable to see the chat box in this screen. Are there any more questions we need to address?
Sorry. Just excellent presentations. Lots of kudos for Angela. I'll make certain to send her the copy of the chat box so she can see that. So as always, it's great to hear from Angela, and we're excited that she could share. So Laura Dunn just said, thank you so much, Angela, as well.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, and I'll clarify that meeting invites have been sent for the coordinators forum in January and February. And now that we have a topic for March, I will send those out later today so that you guys can hold the date on your calendars.
Well, Tammy, if you will go ahead and stop the recording, Angela or Dr. Brown, I'm sorry, if you would hang out with us for just a couple minutes in case we get any last minute questions.